Okay, hi everyone. My name is Haley. I'm going to get this thing going. So thank you all so much for coming and welcome to the Blended ARCE program panel hosted by Cal Poly ARCE. We're so excited to have you here today. We're going to be going into a little bit of introductions with our co-moderators, and then we'll dive into a panel overview. Okay. So as I said, my name is Haley. I am a third-year architectural engineering student, and I am this year's service chair for Cal Poly ARCE.
My name is Evie Trulis, and I'm a third-year architectural engineering student at Cal Poly, and I'm serving as the CAD and BI rep for Cal Poly ARCE.
And hi, everybody. My name is Elizabeth Claypool. I am a fourth-year architectural engineering student here at Cal Poly, and I am this year's secretary for SEOC. So first, we wanted to start off with a little bit of an overview of what the panel will look like. So first, we're going to start with some goals of the panel, then we'll go into introductions for our four graduate school panelists, and then we'll be hearing from Cole on the application process, some details of the program, and then finally, we'll be opening up the floor to questions for our Q&A session. And then just a heads up, throughout the presentations, please feel free to submit questions that you have throughout the chat box. Evie will be kindly moderating that. And those will be answered during the final Q&A portion. We do ask that you keep yourself muted during the presentations though. This meeting will also be recorded, so if you want to go back and look at any of the information that we hear, we'll be distributing that through the Twiz next week. So for some goals of the panel, first and foremost, we wanted to provide information to students about the Cal Poly Blended program. You know, it's kind of application seasons and people have been asking a lot of questions about the program in general and the application process. We also wanted to answer questions on a more personal level, so things that you can't necessarily find by just Googling them. And finally, we wanted to help students build their network of structural engineers and Cal Poly alumni.
So first, we will be hearing from Cole McDaniel, who's the head of the Cal Poly Blended Master's program, and then we'll be hearing from our four panelists. All of these panelists today have graduated from different classes, and now they work in a wide variety within the field of structural engineering. We're excited to hear about their experiences and insights after leaving Cal Poly. So Cole, we're going to let you take it away whenever you're ready, and then we'll just be filtering the slides for you.
All right, thank you. So this will be a brief just introduction about the program, and you will be receiving by tomorrow afternoon an email link that allows you to access the application for the program. Overall, the vision of the program is different than, say, other universities in that we wanted a balance of practice and theory to get you ready to be a structural engineer. It begins with being at Cal Poly, you're allowed to double count 9 units. So that's why it's called blended. Those 9 units then cut down your 45 units of grad work down to 36. So you can finish in 9 months, where that's typically fairly difficult at another university. The classes are advanced mechanics, the core classes at least. You have an advanced mechanics course, ARCE 501, ARCE 502 and 503 are nonlinear analysis courses. You get introduced to nonlinear analysis in ARCE 483, where you start to run a nonlinear pushover, but that's just the beginning. There's a lot more that goes into it. And by the end of your graduate program, you'll be running nonlinear time history analyses, which is a big jump from what you would be doing in 483. So those classes 502 and 503, along with ARCE 504, which is a finite element course, get you ready for ARCE 511, which is the class. It's the only lab class on the structure side where you end up running the nonlinear time history analyses and look at performance-based design and analysis. You also have between 1 to 2 quarters of architectural design studio, and that is in collaboration with other architects. And in the past, the MS architecture program is fairly small, but they've been growing in the past couple of years. So now it's a better balance of architects and archies. And then there's an opportunity, if you'd like, to either go a thesis route or a comprehensive examination route. So a thesis, thesis or a project, they're one and the same at Cal Poly. A project just can be worked on by two people at the same time with different emphases, where a thesis has to be individual. That's really the only difference. You also can have, there's technical electives are from 3 to 12. So you may have a lot of research, which will eat up those technical electives, or you might decide to take an elective in another department, such as CM or CRP. Students have taken architecture, mechanical engineering, business courses. So there are a lot of options on the technical elective sides, if that's something that you're interested in. So next slide, please. So this is a little sketch we put together that kind of gives an overview of what this looks like. So in 511, or sorry, in ARCE 501 at the top, you start with basic mechanics, trying to break down a better understanding of what's going on at the element level. And then in 502, 503 on the right side, you're going to be getting into the nonlinear behavior of elements. With 504, you're going to hopefully become a better modeler. A lot of times employers are pretty upset that young engineers believe what the computer says. It's similar to what Bill Baker, the quote there in the center, says, it's unfortunate when the engineer has to ask the computer how the building works. It should preferably be the other way around. And that's the goal, to have a better understanding of what you're placing into the computer analysis program and hopefully having better results. And then on the bottom with architecture 551, you'll be coming up with preliminary building design. So starting basically from scratch on that side. And then in ARCE 511, you're looking at 3D nonlinear pushover, and then also nonlinear time history analysis, which you then will assess to see what does the building look like. Do you imagine it would be immediate occupancy, life safety, collapse prevention, rather than just saying broadly that the building's designed to life safety? You'll have a much better estimate of what the building performance is. Next slide, please. So there's one of the unique things about the program is you can work with a professor on research at the master's level. Most universities now, it's at the PhD level. So you can have from 1 to 3 quarters of research. If you just want a quarter just to have a taste of what the research is like and to get that experience, that's fine. You can do 1 to 2 quarters, but once it becomes 3 quarters, then you're now into a thesis or what we call a project. So that would be the focus for your work, and then you would no longer take the comprehensive exam. This is an example of a student who worked on a building as it was being constructed. He looked at how the building performance changed over time from the bare structural system, adding the non-structural, and then the final complete structure. So he looked at the building dynamics as it was being constructed. This is up in Berkeley, up at its Tipping Structural Engineers new office. Next slide, please. So a couple things. You enroll in your master's and bachelor's courses, you basically have the 2 degrees at the same time. So once you finish your master's degree, then you get your master's and your bachelor's. If for some reason you needed to, someone gives you $1 million and you decide, I'm just going to stop and just want your bachelor's degree, you're welcome to do that at any time. But until you finish up with the master's program, those 2 end up coming at the same time. You enter the program once you've finished 180 units, which is typically either your, oh, thanks. I'm reading my little message down below. Typically that's going to be winter or spring quarter of your senior year, of your 4th year. Your options there again are a thesis or project or a comprehensive exam, and I can answer more questions on that. Grad tuition, people usually ask about, it's about a 15% increase in tuition. So it's not a huge jump. I mean, it is something, but it's not a dramatic jump from the undergrad. And your MS ARCE degree will count as 1 year towards the work experience for your PE exam. So instead of 2 years of work, you already have 1 under your belt. And I'd say probably one of the best things about the program is that we've been tracking students for the past 10 years, 100% job placement. We haven't had a student who has not found a job. And a lot of them have really improved their hiring potential. So the places like KPFF and Arup, Dagenkolb, Burrell Happel, WJE, Walter P. Moore, some really good local firms as well. So from that side, that's probably what I'm most proud about the program, is that every student has had, if not at least one, but often multiple job offers when you're done. Next slide, please. So an example, Chase Kozak, who was one of our master students, he ended up working on the base isolation of this structure, which just opened up down in Los Angeles. Super exciting building with a lot of design challenges. Next slide. This is the structure I was showing you earlier. Alex Zavala had done his grad work on shaking the structure that's on the left. So the two buildings look similar. The one on the right is a standard design, which the Tipping used to have their office in. And then the one on the left it's base isolated, but it's isolated at the top of the first story. So there's a brewery down below, which is not isolated. It'll go through the normal earthquake motions, but the office building above is isolated. And that ended up being his thesis work. And now he actually works in that particular office. So next slide, please. So eligibility, a lot of people ask, well, what's typically is the cutoff? Right around 3.2, something around there for your ARCE and your overall GPA is where we've had the cutoff, but it changes slightly year to year. So if you have any questions on that, let me know. I would encourage you to apply, even if you're below that, but close, and particularly if your grades are increasing. We have found that students that have performed well over the past year, that your GPA is trending up, that typically tracks well into your grad work. So that's an important part. And when you do fill out your master's application, make sure you fill in the grades for this quarter. And it'll be particularly important since the last year was mostly online. The grades this quarter, with everybody being back in person, will be more meaningful than normal. So you're going to apply at the end of fall quarter, and the date, actually, it'll be on another slide, is the Thursday after grades are due. That way, once you receive your grades, you'll be able to input those grades and then send it in. And go ahead and, acceptance. Acceptance, people usually ask, acceptance will happen early in winter quarter. You'll know one way or the other. So applications are due December 16th by 12 p.m. You're going to email them directly to me. That'll be included in the email and the link that you receive by tomorrow. And please include your fall quarter grades. We'll let you know by winter quarter. And you're going to end up filing for grad status either in winter or spring quarter. A couple things, make sure your GWR is completed as soon as possible. I know it's been strange lately with the way they've been handling it at the university, so they're giving us a little bit of leeway there, but whenever you have the opportunity, make sure you complete that. And then also be thinking about classes. Some of you have already talked about taking advanced structural systems in the winter. That can be an actual grad class. If you don't need it for your undergrad, you're then taking grad classes early and lightening your load for next year. Seismic rehab is offered in the spring. ARCE 400 post-tension concrete is offered in the spring. And there are students also that have been taking structural fire protection in the summer in order to build up units to lighten the load the following year. Next slide, please. That might be it. All right.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Cole, for taking the time to put this together. We're going to move into our presentations, and we'll be hearing from Chris Martinez, who graduated in 2018.
Hi, everyone. As she mentioned, my name is Chris Martinez. I'm an Associate 3 at Wiss Janney Elsner Associates, or WJE for short. I'm currently located in the San Francisco Bay Area office and have been in this office as well as the industry as a whole since I got out of college in 2018, which is now about 3.33 years. As of right now, I am only a licensed drone pilot, but I do plan and I'm in the process of getting my dual licensure as both a California PE and California architect. From the 2017 to 2018 school year, I was in the Cal Poly Blended program and decided to pursue the research path as opposed to a coursework or a thesis one. I had the fortunate opportunity to be a part of a 3-person team for one of Anahit's projects that involved damage mapping and identification. More specifically, we started by finding hundreds, if not thousands, of photos with various damage types of structural elements. An example being the lower photo on the right, which was categorized as rebar buckling damage in a column. From there, we worked with some computer science students who created a machine learning program that we used to identify the zones of damage. So for the shown image, we told the program to look at the buckled rebar, which is highlighted in red. After learning the damage type, the program would then identify damage on other images that it hadn't seen. And then I also created a program using the MATLAB graphical user interface to plot images onto a global map that created a makeshift database for someone to find photos of various damage types or other information as it relates to structural damage. But as a result, we did learn that MATLAB is not the best coding language for this to work. And this has subsequently been explored with other softwares such as Trimble. However, I did not assist with that. Another unique opportunity that I had was in my 4th year, where I decided to help out Kevin Dong out on his revitalization of Poly Canyon. Specifically, it was the very first project that had been touched out there for, I believe, almost a decade, so it was pretty cool. I was a part of a 9-person interdisciplinary team that worked on the modular house. And for those who don't know, the modular house was previously inhabited by students until they couldn't live in it anymore, at which point it became deteriorated and vandalized. We went into the modular house and removed all the trash and various debris, as well as removed the infill walls and floors, leaving only the structural tube steel framing and roof because that had asbestos. From there, we designed and built the guardrail system around the perimeter of the structure, utilizing the iconic street signs that were a part of the original modular house aesthetic, as well as installed a composite deck with steel stairs on the first floor so that the public could once again have access to it. Oh, and very briefly, I did want to touch on the fact that I completed the ARCE MS program by taking the comprehensive exam, which did not change my program duration, which was still only 1 year. You can go to the next slide now. So one advantage that I personally saw with the Cal Poly MS program was that it was a lot cheaper, being that this is a state school, and in my eyes, the education was fairly close to other UCs, but obviously still maintained that cheaper tuition. Now, admittedly, the tuition price value was compounded by me or for me by the fact that I was in state and I received a scholarship that covered almost 70% of the tuition. However, I still think that as a whole, there is a lot of bang for your buck. Additionally, I greatly appreciated the close relationships that I developed with the teachers and the other graduate students. I think we all know just how connected the ARCE professors are with their students and how personable they can be. So it was really great to have that connection be enhanced for another year at Cal Poly. Additionally, my graduate class only consisted of 10 people, which is pretty small and meant that we got very close. Also, because of the small amount of students in the program, it meant that we had a lot of time collaborating and solving challenging problems, which was honestly one of my favorite parts of being in the program. And I know this doesn't exist much in other master's programs, as I did have friends in those programs. Now, for me personally, the main disadvantage that I saw about Cal Poly ARCE MES program was the lack of classes. The ARCE classes we did have were great and provided a great amount of knowledge, but there just wasn't enough of them to get the outsourcing or get enough of them to graduate with a master's degree, which meant we kind of needed to outsource our credits by going to the civil department and joining classes that we thought would be beneficial to us. This was at times difficult as the civil students took priority over us in getting those classes. So if there was no more space, we likely would not have gotten our classes or credits. Also, because of this, it was partly why I chose to do research, as I needed extra credits and research was the only way to get those credits. Lastly, I want to talk about the value of the entire ARCE program, at least how it pertains to me. Now, despite my structural education, I entered into an architectural position, hence why I'm also pursuing my architect's license. With that being said, ARCE has tremendously helped me with my knowledge in structural loading, as it helped me with a very good underlying engineering intuition, which has come in handy when designing and specifying our anchorage solutions for architectural components, as well as providing retrofit repairs for existing structures. And while I do think the ARCE program could benefit from some classes on dealing with already built structures, I definitely had enough confidence in myself and my abilities to enter into a job position that I frankly wasn't really qualified for, being that I was geared more towards architecture. But that confidence has allowed me to do some exciting work, such as rappelling off buildings to investigate existing conditions. And that's all.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing about the projects that you participated in, Chris. We appreciate it. Next, we will be hearing from Jerry Long, who graduated in 2019.
Hi, everyone. Glad to be here. So I'm Jerry. I'm a Cal Poly ARCE grad from 2019. I roughly have 2.25 years to be exact. I just had my 2.0 anniversary, 2-year anniversary. I'm a designer 2 at Degenkolb, and currently I am studying for my California PE licensure. So I passed the national portion, and now I'm studying for the seismic and surveying. Some of the unique experiences I've had at Cal Poly were started in undergrad. So first started with the high bay reaction frame. I reached out to Peter regarding what research he thought would be interesting and unique, and ultimately we decided on this reaction frame that was built in the 1970s and was not used since then. So what me and my research partner did, we investigated how it was built, to what codes it was built to, and some of the capacities of the existing frame. And that kind of led into my master's experience, which was testing of lightly reinforced concrete shear walls. And so this project actually was in collaboration with Garrett Hagen from Degenkolb, but it started out as an investigation of FRP on non-ductile concrete shear walls, and somewhere halfway through it, we had to pivot our research, just because the research the data we were seeing wasn't lining up to our initial assumptions. And so in the image on the top left, you can see that was from our research, but we're seeing a lot of flexural cracks in our walls, and not necessarily a non-ductile behavior. And then in the image on the right, you can see some of the project setup. So there was a lot of scope involved in this project. We had to take our findings from our undergrad research on the reaction frame and use it to upgrade the reaction frame, and then also build supports and a new foundation, and just a lot of moving parts to get to our ultimate goal of testing and researching this non-ductile, which eventually became a lightly reinforced concrete shear wall. And then another experience I had, which was pretty unique, and I did this 2 years in a row, but I participated in the Mbasese initiative with Kevin Dong, and that was basically a outreach program where we went to Tanzania to participate in developing the secondary school that another former Cal Poly ARCE grad sorry if I said alum twice, but he started this initiative to develop a secondary school, higher education out there. So that was pretty unique experience. And you can see the image on the bottom. There is a bridge we built to replace an existing wooden bridge over like a 20-foot deep ravine. Next slide, please. And yeah, some thoughts on the Cal Poly MS program. So I was drawn to this program primarily because of the affordability, also the intimate class sizes. So we had about 12 students in our class. And then lastly, I wanted to focus more on the practical side of engineering. And so that was, I found to be one of the most valuable things going into industry, just having a good understanding of how to put drawings together, how to, I don't know, just like dig through the code, and it was very valuable. And I guess, yeah, touch on the next point. It's a good mix of theoretical and practical knowledge, and having the interdisciplinary courses with the architecture students that kind of forces you to think outside the box, and another valuable asset to have in the industry for sure. And yeah, with that, I conclude my portion, and we'll pass it on to Tanya.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing about your experiences here, Jerry. And like you said, next we'll be hearing from Tanya Wolfarth, who graduated in 2019.
Hey everyone, I'm Tanya Wolfarth. I'm currently a design engineer at KPFF in San Diego, and I've been here for about 2 years now. I'm also currently studying for the California PE exam. I chose the ARCE program in general because of the practicality, kind of like Jerry mentioned. I got a lot of really interesting opportunities by pursuing that ARCE program, and one of them was getting to go to Nepal through SESH, which is Structural Engineering Students for Humanity, and that's like the picture in the top. And you can see Jerry's there too. We were the same year. He got to go as well, and we got to go to Nepal for a week and got to evaluate an existing school and come up with some interesting retrofit solutions, which was a really cool experience, and kind of led into my desire to want to take the seismic rehab course in my master's year. I also got the opportunity to do a senior project in Rwanda with Journeyman International. And that's the lower photo here. Tia and I designed a women's co-op, and that was a really cool opportunity because we got to work with a Cal Poly architect and CM student, and the 4 of us got to design the building from start to finish and then meet the women who are actually going to be using that building. So that was really rewarding experience to get to actually go see and learn how to design a different type of construction than we would ever use here, confined masonry. So that was really interesting. And then I did the master's program using the comprehensive exam course. I really wanted to get my master's, and because I wanted to take more classes and kind of dive into deeper topics than we got to in our undergrad. So that was like the main push for me to go into the Cal Poly program. Next slide. Yeah, so those were my main reasons. I liked being able to choose different classes. I got to take advanced concrete, which I was really interested in concrete in undergrad, and I didn't have enough time to take it. And I was really excited about that course. I got to take PT, seismic rehab, like I mentioned, which was very beneficial going into the industry. So many people have no idea what ASC 41 even is, let alone like how to use it or what the point is. And so just even having like basic knowledge of how to flip through that code really puts you ahead. We also got to take like seismic geotech class and engineering probability course. So all of those were really interesting. And then as Cole mentioned, that 511 course, which he usually teaches, was also really helpful, especially going into the industry. Just learning how to model in ETABS alone is really helpful going into the industry, and all the ARCE core courses are so helpful in understanding, once you use ETABS, basically like why ETABS does things the way it does. And so you'll kind of like look into the results and be like, oh, like that's how it's doing the like meshing, or, you know, like you see how it goes through all the things that you were learning theoretically. And so I really enjoyed that part of the master's program because I wasn't as interested in research. And I just thought it was so nice that we got to kind of put everything together that we had learned throughout all 5 years. Let's see if there's anything I didn't mention. Yeah, I think overall it's a very practical program. I feel like I've talked to other colleagues who went to other programs, and you already know as an undergraduate student at Cal Poly how much of the focus is on practicality and understanding what you're doing. And I feel like that kind of continues through in the master's program and really prepared me well. And helped me stand out in my like current position now. So, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing, Tanya. And next we will be hearing from our last panelist, who is Margot Burkholder, who graduated in 2010.
Thanks, Elizabeth. My name is Margot Burkholder. Nice to meet you all or see you all. I currently work for Walter P. Moore in Los Angeles, and I'm a senior associate level, which in Walter P. Moore terms is like one level below principal. And at this point in double digits, I'm not counting quarters or halves, so it's just 11 years. We're somewhere in the 11 to 12 year range at this point. So that's PE from California, PE and SE in California. And then I, during the pandemic, took a wild remote move to Hawaii. So I currently live in Maui right now, coming to you from there, hence why it's slightly lighter outside compared to probably where the rest of you are. Walter P. Moore is a hybrid remote firm at this point. We're going to stay that way past the pandemic. So I took advantage of that to make some life changes. And here I am coming from Maui to you guys. So when I entered into the program, into the master's program, I think it was the third year of the program, maybe, I can't remember. And it was really, to be honest, driven by the recession that was going on. I think like many fourth to fifth years was really struggling with whether I was ready for the real world or not, and whether grad school was something I needed to do or didn't need to do, or maybe I would do it, but do it later after a couple of years of practical experience. But the recession sort of made that choice for me. And it was really not an option to get jobs at that point. So I decided to stay and pursue my master's. And it's probably the best thing that ever happened for my career to have done that. And I'll explain a little bit of why. But when I was there, third year in, there still was no option to test out. So there's no comprehensive exam, and there was no necessarily group project or research project. Everyone had to pursue their own thesis. And so my thesis was I got selected to be part of Degenkolb's sort of suite of thesis prompts that they had put together to give 2 a year to the master's students. And it was the same prototype structure, which is up there in the corner, just a standard office building somewhere hypothetically in San Francisco. And we just rotated out the lateral system. And so every student got a different lateral system that they then plugged into the same building and then ran through all of the ASC 41 analysis types. So linear static, linear dynamic, nonlinear static, nonlinear dynamic, and then looked at the performance of that building and how it progressively got better as your analysis got more thorough, as you would expect it to see. But as a student, to drive that point home was really eye-opening. So I got very well versed in ETABS modeling, like Tanya was saying. I got really well versed in Perform 3D. I got really well versed in how to read through AC 41, which became a huge asset as I started to get into my career. I did that with Bob Pekelnicki at Degenkolb up north, and then Jim Guthrie was my master's professor liaison, and then we had to present it at the end of the year. What I didn't show, I almost put a screenshot of the final picture of the title page of my thesis, because I may have graduated in June 2010, but that paper says July 2012. So it took a little bit of time and it took a little while to finally get that degree, but I think that it still taught me a ton. Next slide, please. How I started to use that, how I started to use the work that I did in my thesis, and how I started to use the work that I got from the master's program in general. I entered into, my niche has sort of become performance-based design, high-rise, and seismic retrofit or rehab projects. So that top picture up there is me and my colleagues standing in a 12-foot deep mat foundation, getting ready for a concrete pour. The pour is happening behind us. Further down on that mat that day, you can see the booms in the background. And then in the bottom is just some snapshots of the high-rise towers and retrofits that I've done to date, just a handful of them. And it quite literally wouldn't have been possible to have had such a like an integral role or to be the project lead on these had I not learned the nonlinear analysis and behavior that I learned in the master's program. And I think that one of the main benefits of getting that exposure to nonlinear applications at Cal Poly, because you'll get it at other master's programs too, but to be taught by your same professors in the same way that you learned the linear static stuff, the fundamentals, really drove the point home for me. I was able to build off of that a lot easier than per se having to go somewhere different and learn from different professors who might use different nomenclature or might word it differently, might use different programs. I felt like that really set me up to like grasp as much of it as possible. The fact that it's more of a balance of practical and theory, I think for me personally was well suited for where I wanted my career to go. That's a choice everyone needs to make on whether that theory is something you really enjoy and want to go down that route, because that will affect your career path. But for me, I think that everything that that program provided definitely led me to being able to work on some of these really exciting projects all around LA. And we did, even still in the recession, I think my class of maybe 10 of us still got 100% placement that year. I don't think anyone went without a job, which says a lot to a program that even in its third year had a new reputation. Now you guys are coming into something much more established. So I think it says a lot about what the program is doing and how it's preparing students. So yeah, that's my story.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Margot, and thank you to all of our panelists who presented today. We are going to be transitioning into the Q&A session of the panel. So feel free to send questions in the chat box or raise your hand. For the first couple of minutes, Cole will be sticking around to answer some questions about logistics, and then we'll be asking all faculty to step out of the meeting, and then we'll continue the Q&A session with just the panelists.
I have a question. So I think a couple of the panelists sort of touched on it, but I would really love to know how the skills and experiences during your MS at Cal Poly compared to those that you have seen from your colleagues, just kind of, word of mouth, and what you thought was advantageous or perhaps maybe missing.
I can start briefly. I think that one of the most advantageous things from the Cal Poly program in general is how accustomed we are to like using the codes. You'd be kind of surprised how few programs do that. I know I was really surprised going in the industry, especially because I come in, I bring in all my books that are all tabbed and have everything, and people are coming and borrowing my codes. And I think that's really interesting. And I feel like that's such a good representation of Cal Poly, how they focus on that so much.
Yeah, I
have my
can
ACI tablet.
briefly touch on one too, at least that similar to the aspect of codes, right? I think the fact that Cal Poly does a pretty good job at like teaching everyone how to do design work. A lot of other schools and educations don't necessarily have that practical experience and practical design that's incorporated into the education. And I know from talking to other coworkers that they didn't have even half the amount of work that we've done in terms of the design labs that we do even here at Cal Poly. And that was definitely super, in my opinion, advantageous to have that skill set and just instantly get to start doing calculations and know what I was doing, being confident in what I was doing. I didn't necessarily have to have any hand holding. It was kind of very streamlined, straight from education to going. Granted, there were some things that needed to be adjusted to kind of fit the format of the actual workplace that I'm doing it at, but I definitely had that knowledge beforehand that Cal Poly provided, and it was extremely beneficial, I thought, at least to have that.
Yeah, to piggyback off of what Chris said, I think the other thing that it does is it emulates the work environment in so much that all those labs and even the major projects that you'll do in the master's course are somewhat deadline driven. If you know you've got this project that you have to complete by the end of the quarter, semester, or whenever it is, and it's really on you to make sure that you're working backwards to get what you need from the professors, what you need from your teammates. It puts you in this accountability setting very early on, which work is all about that. I mean, you end up in places where you need to be assertive and be resourceful. And I think it teaches you how to that mentality so that you're really prepared for the expectations of work in that environment. I think it really sets you up pretty well for that.
So Margot, if I could
Yeah.
actually expand on that. Oh, did somebody else have something else to say?
No, I was just gonna say, yeah, I totally agree with all those points. Being able to dig through the codes, having that knowledge right when you get into the industry, you know, the design labs and also the accountability part. Those are all things I'm currently dealing with right now, and I'm so appreciative that I have those skills and being able to apply. And I think that definitely sets me apart from my colleagues that went to other universities.
So Margot kind of spoke about this specifically, but I'm sure all of you can touch on it, kind of like this importance of learning nonlinear during your master's program. So I really appreciated the point that, you know, your professors are using the same lingo because these are the people that you learned, you know, linear from. Did you feel that you got the same content in terms of like, you know, nonlinear?
Absolutely.
But it was just like, okay.
Yeah, if not more. I mean, I think my thesis work really put me at an extra level of that. You know, I probably was driving that point home for myself more so than maybe my peers in my same class just because of my thesis content. But nevertheless, we were still doing small projects between, you know, one or two people where you had to go and figure out the backbone curves, where you had to go and figure out how to model these hinges and perform, or in ETABS. And I think that having to do it yourself, some other master's programs will have you do that too. But I do think that there is nothing, we're certainly not getting less exposure. We're getting the same or perhaps more, I would say, and that's also been my experience now as one of the main recruiters as like I'm sure everyone else on the panel is, and now you're helping to hire for your firm and you're seeing the resumes and you're talking to these students that come from the other programs. And that's when it starts to really show that it's not only the content of the material, but how much they've processed it and how they're able to communicate that back to you of how much they really like grasped from the program. I think this program helps it stick a little better than some others may.
That's awesome. Thank you so much.
So we got a question in the chat box. So this person's asking, I feel like there isn't much wiggle room for us to take engineering classes that are outside of those that are already on the ARCE undergrad curriculum. Do you feel like you had more time in the grad program to take classes that interested you, or is it the program? Or is the program also very structured?
It's definitely allows for more freedom. At least when I was there, I was able to, like I kind of mentioned briefly in my presentation, I was able to sort of outsource the credits from the civil department, and was able to take 2 classes from the civil department. I could have done more, but the ones that I took, I found were valuable and something that we actually hadn't learned even in the undergrad before. So I was curious about that, and me along with I think 4 other students actually took those classes from the civil department. And if you can get them, then yeah, you can explore them, right? I think the challenge is trying to get them, but if you communicate early enough with the department, specifically whatever department you're trying to enter the classes for, they'll probably try and fit you in for that.
Yeah, and I agree. I feel like the undergrad program has so many classes you need to take, which is so good because I think they're all really useful, but I think that can also be hard to even fit in maybe 1 or 2 electives sometimes. And so having that extra year is really nice to be able to, expand. And I took a few classes in the civil department too that I thought were helpful. And you do have so much more freedom with that, with which ones you want to take.
Thank you so much.
I have a question. So did any of you guys ever consider going into the field first and then returning and completing your master's, or was it just like you all knew that you wanted to go into it straight away?
I think from my perspective, I think it's easier to do it right away. It's just once you start working, you have a bunch of other influences, such as that paycheck that comes every other week and more free time on the weekend. And so if you have the capability, I would definitely recommend just roughing it out for another year, and just it's worth it. It's worth it.
Yeah, I agree with Jerry. I feel like that was my experience as well. I also feel like it helps you stand out so much too when you're applying for jobs, having a master's, and it gives you like one more year or like one more summer of internship experience potentially, to kind of help you decide what you want to do with your career. So I think it was definitely really beneficial to go right out of school when you're still like in the school mindset. Especially for me, it made sense too, since I didn't go into the research path. It made sense to me to like take more classes to be able to be prepared for work and then go straight into work.
I would also admit that when I was in fourth year, I wasn't actually looking to do grad school, but because of the streamlined process of entering into the master's program at Cal Poly, I decided just for the heck of it to apply, and I got in. And so I figured, what's one more year? I've been doing school for quite a while, so I might as well do it. And I thought it was definitely a good decision to do it. And I know based on people who were in my grad program, as well as friends and eventually coworkers who kind of went to the field and then went to school afterwards, it kind of was a lot more kind of difficult to get back into the mindset of doing school and learning. And also you have probably forgotten some things that you haven't touched in a while. So it's kind of like relearning again. So that can be a little bit difficult, but if you're willing to do that, that works too.
I kind of have a piggyback question off of what Tanya was talking about with, job applications and whatnot. So did you, like, how well known is the Cal Poly ARCE MS degree in industry, and especially like outside of California, would you say?
I don't know if I could speak too much about outside of California, because I grew up in California and I only was applying here. But I think that the master's program itself isn't that well known, but the Cal Poly ARCE undergrad program is really well known. And so I think that really helps the master's program a lot. People really trust Cal Poly ARCE students in terms of like hiring and recruiting. And so that helps with the master's program as well, especially because the master's program is fairly newer and in general a lot smaller.
I think outside of the California area, it depends on the firm. I mean, if there's a firm that they're connected, if they're a multi-state firm and they've got peers in California or people to tell them and vouch for what Cal Poly, what the sort of reputation it has, then it can, by word of mouth, make its way there. I think firms that are not, that don't have a California hub probably don't know it very well. But that's okay. I mean, I think that is pretty normal. We can, for me at least, when I was just like Tony said, when it came to masters, I didn't even think to look outside California, particularly just because seismic is what we focus on. So I do think that the master's program within California is starting to get a pretty decent reputation for itself, primarily because the undergrad is so strong. People just make assumptions that the master's will be the same, and that's fairly accurate, I would say, biased obviously. But I do think that that reputation is definitely starting to make its way through California pretty strongly.
California is not such a horrible place to be either. Not Hawaii though.
Yeah. So how did you guys like choose between research and coursework, and how did you find a project or like a professor to work with? And like, did you get to choose a topic to explore or something?
I can start. I chose research because I needed some extra credits, but I mean, I did have the opportunity, obviously, to work with Anahid, and she kind of discussed with us, at least as a class, what was the opportunity if you wanted to pursue the research with her. And to me, it sounded very interesting. So it ended up working out really good because I liked what I was hearing that she wanted to do, and was kind of inspired to work hard at the research itself and see if there was a potential solution or whatever that, you know, that Anahid wanted specifically. But I don't know. For me, that's kind of how I approached it. It's a little not the onus wasn't really on me, but I would definitely encourage students that if they are in the master's program to at least kind of reach out either at your fourth year if you're planning to go to grad, or at the start of your grad, to just the professors, just to see if they have any research, if you're curious, and if it might be entertaining to you. And that way you can kind of already start planning those steps to partake in that research.
Yeah, for me, it started with my undergrad research and or was it research project, and that just came up spontaneously one day. I was just curious about what Peter did on the side because I was grading for one of his classes, and so he presented this opportunity for me, and it seemed pretty cool, but I didn't really understand what I was getting into because it was a lot of work, but I really did enjoy it. I learned a lot about steel design and antique codes, vintage codes, and that ultimately led to my thesis, or not my thesis, master's research project, in which we tested the concrete shear wall, and Anahid and Peter teamed up on that one, and it was just a natural segue into that from the undergraduate research. So.
Okay, so I have a question. Did any of you guys work as teaching assistants or have like part-time work or were involved in any sort of funding provided by the school in order to help pay your tuition?
I was a TA for Radu for multiple classes. I mean, the pay was all right. I primarily used it for rent, admittedly. It wasn't necessarily towards my education. But I also did end up kind of magically, I think, getting a scholarship from the school. I wish I tried looking for the document to see how I got it, but I don't actually know how I got it. It definitely just appeared one day on my account, and it was super helpful. But yeah, there are definitely scholarship opportunities out there within actual Cal Poly, but also like SEOC and things like that that you can pursue, and then they'll definitely provide a good amount. So I think doing those, you might be surprised at what you can get, and actually how beneficial it could be.
I'll add, if you choose to do the research or thesis routes, there are opportunities for research grants, and for our research, we got 2 grants. One was the Structural Engineering Foundation grant. I think it was around $2,500, and then the other one, Anahid can correct me if I'm wrong, but RSCA, Research Scholarly Creative Activities, from the university, and that was a good substantial amount. I think like $20,000 or something, and that helped pay for some of the teacher or professors' times and our time as we did the research.
I didn't get any scholarships during my time, but as Chris mentioned, CIOS gives scholarships, and then I sit on the board for ACI, SoCal now, and they provide scholarships as well to students. And sometimes you'd be surprised at how few people actually apply, because it's just hard to know where to find these things and what's available. And if you apply, you'll probably get it, because there's not as much, it's just hard sometimes to know where to look. But if any of you are interested, ACI SoCal does provide scholarships, and I could certainly help connect you with how to apply for them.
I know we're coming up on time here, but I do have one more question in the chat box. And this person asks, it seems like a lot of students who go into grad school partially choose to do so because they don't feel ready to go into industry. If this was the case for you, do you think that the program helped ease those worries once it was time for you to start working?
I would say yes, for me personally. I think that I was still not entirely sure where my passions lied and what my capabilities really were. And I think that the master's program gave me that extra year. And I think Tanya mentioned it earlier, an extra internship, about that extra year to just do something out in the real world that helped give me some more connections. Through that intern, I didn't go work for the company I interned for, but they are who got me my final spot after grad school. So I think that that extra year helped tremendously with my confidence and my capabilities, and just some extra connections within the industry to end up in the right spot. So yeah, I think it went a long way.
Yeah, and I also think, and Cole mentioned it earlier, how like it still counts towards a year towards your licensure. I feel like that's a big fear people have, that, oh, you're going to be behind, or you're like classmates that graduated and just went straight into industry, but you really aren't behind. I think that was like a really helpful reminder for me as well.
Awesome. Well, we are right at 8:02 now, so we don't really have any more questions in the chat box. So I think we're gonna go ahead and finish up, but I really appreciate all of you panelists that were able to, take your time putting together a presentation and coming to talk, tell us a little bit about your experiences. And thank you to all the participants that were able to make it out. Like I mentioned before, this meeting was recorded, so we'll go ahead and send out that link once it's put together in the Twiz next week. And you can share it with anybody that wasn't able to make the meeting. So cool. We'll stay in here for anybody that has any other